Hello and welcome to Forecasting Phil, the AccuWeather Spring Preview. I'm your host, Melissa Constanzer. Get ready for a very special show. We'll preview AccuWeather's spring forecast, and we have a panel of experts ready to give us their predictions on whether or not Punxsutawney Phil will see his shadow this year. Here at AccuWeather, we have an affection for Groundhog Day, so we'll be keeping a close eye on what happens with Phil on February 2nd. We'll meet our panel shortly, but first, we'd like to welcome our extra special guest, Stephen Tobolowsky. Stephen has appeared in more than 250 films and television shows. No character is arguably more beloved than insurance salesman Ned Ryerson. Stephen played Ned in the 1993 classic movie Groundhog Day. Welcome, Stephen, and thank you so much for joining us. I have a question. Have you ever met Punxsutawney Phil?
I was at the Groundhog Day, the real Groundhog Day, out in the woods of Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania. And there I did meet a groundhog. So if it was Phil, I met him.
Can you tell us what it was like shooting the movie in the temperatures, the cold weather?
Well, it's an interesting question because whenever you're doing a movie, you are wearing a costume, right? But when you're doing Groundhog Day, it is a movie that is about one day. That day has to be exactly the same. So you are wearing the same costume for weeks. And that is not dependent on weather conditions. The further complication was that Harold Ramis was not sure exactly what the meteorological conditions of the repeated day would be in Groundhog Day. So, in other words, Bill Murray and I, we shot that opening street scene in every weather condition you could imagine in the same kind of clothes. So we shot in rain, we shot in snow, we shot in sun, and in the end, Harold Ramis picked the cold, gloomy day. So as an actor, you have to adapt. And so we had all sorts of body warmers. We had all sorts of body warmers in our pockets and our shoes, even in my hat to keep my head warm. It was ferocious.
Thanks, Stephen. We'll have more with Stephen later in the show. Let's meet our panelists joining us today. Meteorologist Larry Mowry is from WLS ABC 7 in Chicago. Larry has been forecasting weather for more than 20 years. Larry has guided viewers through many severe weather events, and we know Chicago gets plenty of them. From Philadelphia's 6 ABC, Brittany Boyer. Brittany Boyer is an avid skier and was an on-air AccuWeather broadcaster not too long ago. Now she's back in her hometown covering the weather she grew up in. Also joining us, Don Big Weather Schwinneker. Don is chief meteorologist at ABC 11 in Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina. Don's been honored with 2 Associated Press Awards for Best Weathercast and got his nickname covering many big weather events. And speaking of big weather events, let's welcome AccuWeather senior meteorologist Paul Pastelok. Paul is our head long-range forecaster and gave us a preview of our official spring forecast.
It's the northern tier of the nation that winter is going to hang on a little bit longer, especially across the Pacific Northwest, Northern Rockies, and into the high plain states. La Nina is going to linger for a little while, and so that northern storm track is going to keep going across that region. We try to find years in the past that match up to the current pattern, and we noticed with some analog years like 2012, there was a big snowstorm in the Northeast, and so even though we may be predicting some warmth in March coming on strong and in early spring, we still could see a setback and bring us some snow at some point during the spring. Can we see some warm-ups going into the spring for the eastern half of the nation? I do think so, because I think these cold fronts that do come in from the west, you'll start to see the better achieving warmth that comes ahead of these fronts. We have not seen that in January. Any type of cold front that came in, it was already cold before it and after it as well. So this time around, I do think we'll see some warm surges that get out ahead of these cold fronts, and you'll see it in the Ohio Valley, the Tennessee Valley, the Mid-Atlantic, and especially across the Southeast. I do feel it's going to be pretty warm going into the early part of spring. You would think that, maybe this year severe weather would be slower getting going because of all this cold that we've seen in stable air in January. That was expected, but the atmosphere is funny because it can turn on you in just a second. And we do feel that February, it starts to become more unstable. And the reason why is we're going to have this strong contrast of temperatures setting up between the south and southeast and the Gulf Coast and the Arctic air that's still kind of lingering across the northern tier of the nation. That strong contrast in temperatures and a change in the overall storm track coming in from the west coast to the plains could trigger severe weather faster in late February, possibly early March, and farther north than usual, maybe getting into states like Missouri and southern Iowa and Illinois faster this spring. So something to watch. We could see some very strong storms. We've seen some research on this in past years that have matched up that showed very strong events that took place even early in the season.
Let's go to Punxsutawney, where we sent our Lincoln Riddle in search of an exclusive interview with Phil. Here's what he found.
It's hard to miss Punxsutawney Phil when you come to this town. He's literally larger than life. Scattered around are 32 of these 6-foot tall statues, and they're all painted very creatively.
Thanks, Lincoln. Looks like you're having fun. There's more to come after the break. And here's a fun fact you might not know about Punxsutawney Phil. Welcome back to Forecasting Phil and the AccuWeather Spring Forecast. Our meteorologists are keeping a close eye on the weather for February 2nd. That's when Phil comes out to give us his own forecast in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, also known as the weather capital of the world. And that will happen right where our Emmy Victor is, at Gobbler's Knob Podium.
Just about everyone in town is wondering whether Phil's going to see his shadow for Groundhog Day. We'll meet our furry forecasting friend in just a moment, but for now, let's take a look at the history of Groundhog Day. It's here in this small Pennsylvania town where people get together to await a prediction of future weather. He's a prognosticator of all prognosticators. His name is Punxsutawney Phil. They claim he's never been wrong, so doubt him if you will. If he sees his shadow, 6 more weeks of winter is the answer, but if he doesn't, springtime weather could come faster. This tradition started in Germany back in the 1800s, when Calamus was practiced, an ancient Christian tradition where clergy would bless and distribute candles needed for winter. The candles represented how long and cold the winter would be. The Germans then expanded on this concept by selecting an animal, the hedgehog, as a means of predicting weather. As the tradition made its way to America, German settlers in Pennsylvania switched to groundhogs, which were plentiful in the Keystone State. The town of Punxsutawney, located 80 miles north of Pittsburgh, became the home of this custom.
Well, the first official reports of Groundhog Day in Punxsutawney were 1886, 1887, somewhere around there. That's 135 at least years that Phil has been in Punxsutawney giving his predictions. And it has been the same Phil this entire time. He actually, at every fall, receives the elixir of life at our annual Groundhog picnic. And that's a secret potion that, recipe's been handed down from groundhog handler to groundhog handler. And with every sip, he gets 7 more years of longevity.
So as another year comes and we all grow old, we await a prediction of temperatures we hope to be warm instead of cold.
Thank you, Emmy. Stay with us. We'll have more with Stephen Tobolowsky about his role in one of the greatest weather movies of all time, Groundhog Day.
One thing that was interesting, if you remember the scene where Bill steps into the puddle of water, and watch out for that first step, it's a doozy. It was freezing that day. However, that pool of water did not have snow on it. Because it's a movie and they have to keep everything consistent, it's styrofoam.
Plus, we're bringing in extreme meteorologist Reed Timmer. Welcome back to Forecasting Phil, the AccuWeather Spring Forecast. We asked our panelists, some of the best local weather forecasters around, to tell us what they see ahead for spring.
I'm ABC 11 Chief Meteorologist Don Schwenneker. Here in the Carolinas, I think we continue to see above average temperatures. It's been a very warm winter. December was one of our warmest on record, and I think the above average temperatures will continue as we head into spring. As far as rainfall, we're actually seeing drought in parts of our area and severe drought, and I think the below average rainfall will continue all the way through spring, even into early summer.
Hello from Chicago. I'm right along State Street, that great street right here in downtown Chicago, and across the way is the iconic Chicago Theater. You know, here in Chicago, we had a really slow start to winter. December, very warm. In fact, it ended up being the 6th warmest December on record. And we didn't see any measurable snow until after Christmas. We had never gone that long before we saw our first snow stick to the ground. We've made up for it a little bit here in January, but I think as we head towards the end of winter, winter's going to make a comeback. In fact, I think we'll probably get snow into March and even into April.
Hi, I'm meteorologist Brittany Boyer from 6ABC here in Philadelphia, and this winter so far hasn't been terrible. We've had a couple of cold snaps. We've had some snow, but the bulk of our snow has actually been across our southern viewing area down at the shore. That's where some spots have had more snow this season than the last couple of winters. It's safe to say a lot of people here are ready for spring. It's still several weeks away, but if we're looking at how things have trended over the last couple of years in the Delaware Valley, we've had wetter than normal springs and also warmer than normal springs. So in the weather world, we sometimes say the trend is your friend. I'm going to go along with that for this spring. We'll likely have near to above normal precipitation and likely near to above normal temperatures.
Also joining us today is extreme meteorologist and storm chaser Reed Timmer. You've seen quite a bit of Reed this past year and reporting from all sorts of severe weather events. So Reed, what are your expectations for this spring storm chasing season, and do you think there'll be any surprises?
Well, one thing I've learned over storm chasing the last couple of decades is there are always surprises, and especially during the spring severe weather season. But I do think we're going to have a little bit of a late start to spring severe weather across the Mid-South and the southeastern U.S. So far this winter, we've had a record-breakingly active severe weather and tornado season, especially during the month of December. Multiple tornado outbreaks across the central and southern U.S. And a lot of that is because the Gulf of Mexico had a lot of deep moisture, just this bubble of tropical moisture sitting there. A trough would come in, pick up that moisture, and then bam, you get a severe weather outbreak with a very energized jet stream. But it looks like we've had a pattern shift, and winter has finally arrived over the central and eastern U.S. Arctic air masses are beginning to come down from the north out of Canada, and that's helped to clear out some of the Gulf of Mexico, clear out that tropical moisture that sits down there, clearing out some of that energy available for these severe weather outbreaks. And I think that's going to lead to a delayed start to spring severe weather season across the Mid-South and the southeastern U.S. It's going to take a while for that moisture to build up once again in the Gulf of Mexico. But once that happens, I think severe weather season is going to start off with a bang. It's just going to be a late start, but I do expect that energized jet stream to continue into the spring that's associated at least partially with La Nina.
Thanks, Reed. Once more, we're back with our special guest, Stephen Tobolowsky, for some insight on what it was like to be part of such an iconic film. Looking back, did you think that Groundhog Day would become the classic it is?
We had no idea that the film would be so iconic, but I think since we are on AccuWeather, I will mention one of my theories as to why the film, besides it being just such a good movie, why it is a classic, and that is because of the weather. Because the movie was shot in the winter outside of Chicago, everyone has to wear winter clothing, which doesn't really change with fashion. And you can't see the hairdos. So you don't have the big hair, or the shoulder pads, or everything that dates other films that may have happened in the late 80s, early 90s. So because it was in the winter, people are wearing hats, scarves, coats, whatever. It looks the same as it does today. So it has a timeless look because of the cold.
And we have to ask, if there was a perfect weather day for you to repeat over and over again, what would it be?
Oh gosh, Melissa, perfect weather day. I realized looking back at my life, I am somebody who loves transitions. Didn't know it before, but I love winter going into spring, and I love summer going into fall, that day.
How has Groundhog Day changed for you since the film?
Oh, you mean the actual holiday of Groundhog Day?
Yeah.
Well, I get to come on AccuWeather.
Thank you so much, Stephen. From movie magic to where the real magic happens, join us now from Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, AccuWeather reporter Emmy Victor. Hi, Emmy. What's it like to be in the hometown of America's most famous groundhog?
Hey Melissa, it is so great to be here. This is the place where Phil predicts 6 more weeks of winter or an early spring this year. I'm standing just outside of the Punxsutawney Weather Discovery Center, and each year on Groundhog Day, the center honors an individual that's advanced the fields of weather, climatology, and meteorology. The first person to be inducted into the Hall of Fame here back in 2007 was AccuWeather's own founder and CEO, Dr. Joel Myers.
There's more to come after the break. Find out how our panel voted as we wait to see what happens on Groundhog Day. And we'll wrap up the AccuWeather Spring Forecast. Stay tuned. Welcome back. We're about to find out how our panel voted on whether Punxsutawney Phil will see his shadow. First, let's recap our spring forecast. Winter will hang on longer in parts of the Northwest into the upper Midwest. In late February and early March, we predict a severe weather threat across Tennessee and the lower Mississippi Valley. On the West Coast, Northern California will see more snow and rain, and in the Southeast, temperatures will climb in mid-February and it will stay warm. Let's go back to our Lincoln Riddle, who's wrapping up his visit to Punxsutawney. He's with the star of Groundhog Day, Phil himself, along with handler AJ DeRoom.
Ladies and gentlemen, Punxsutawney Phil!
My name's AJ DeRoom, and I am the rainmaker and Phil's handler for the Punxsutawney Groundhog Club Inner Circle. Phil does live here in his burrow 364 days a year. Sleep and eat is basically his 2 favorite pastimes, mostly sleeping. Well, he's an herbivore, so vegetables, fruit. Kale is probably the main staple of his diet, but his favorite food is bananas. Well, I do maybe up the sugar content a little bit just to give him a little bit of extra energy. It's just when he comes out to greet the crowd, we want to make sure that he's got energy and he's ready to, keep his eye on that shadow and not just fall asleep before it happens, because it is hibernation season. He is a ham for the camera. He's always, people always say, like, how do you get Phil, to just be so happy to greet the crowd? And I don't do anything. I just hold him up. He does everything else. I'm just lucky enough to hang out with him.
Thanks, Lincoln, for that AccuWeather exclusive. It looks like our panel has voted. Let's see what they think. Extreme meteorologist Reed Timmer says Phil will see his shadow. Meteorologist Larry Mallory from WLS ABC 7 in Chicago agrees. So does Brittany Boyer from 6 ABC in Philadelphia. But ABC 11 Chief Meteorologist Don Schwiniger in Raleigh-Durham says no shadow. Spring is on the way. And our special guest, Stephen Tobolowsky, thinks Phil will see his shadow. I think Phil will see his shadow too. I expect winter to stick around through March. That's our show. Thank you to our guest, and a special thank you to Stephen Tobolowsky, who makes every Groundhog Day memorable, again and again. Make sure to be with us bright and early on February 2nd to find out if Phil will see his shadow, or if we can break out our spring fashions. We hope you enjoyed our preview of the AccuWeather Spring Forecast. Remember, head to AccuWeather.com and download our mobile app for up-to-the-minute weather information. For all of us here at AccuWeather, thanks for joining.